So today I want to show you how to analyze a cybersecurity scenario and how to be able to confidently talk about it, explain it to others, and to really understand the issues that are explained in the story. It's really important to have the terminology available for this. I always explain to my students that there's a certain methodology, the main methodology in computer security that you can use as a kind of conceptual methodology behind this. And that's what I'm going to do. So I will look at the register, a story that I found on mobile security actually, and we will discuss this. So first of all, let's read the headline together, and you can find the story by clicking on the link below. So what does the headline say? The headline says, Let's Encrypt warns about a third of Android devices will from next year stumble over sites that use its certs. Expiration of cross-signed root certificates spells trouble for pre-7.1.1 kit unless they're using Firefox. Now, do you understand this? Do you know what it actually means? There are a lot of buzzwords in here. So it's important to, first of all, of course, understand them. So what's Let's Encrypt? And you can Google this. Let's Encrypt is basically a certification authority. It's a very special one because it's trying to actually provide services for free. It's living based on sponsors, and that's kind of quite unusual because normally a certificate authority would charge their customers to pay for the certificates. So a cert, here they say cert, that means certificate, and you know what a certificate is, right? It's just a proof of ownership and value for a public key, basically. And the way how this is achieved is by signing the certificate. So that's basically encrypted using an asymmetric encryption algorithm, using the private key of the owner of that certificate. So it would be the certificate authority typically. So what else? It talks about Android devices. I mean, we probably know what that is. Mobile phones, tablets using the Android mobile operating system. And what else have we got here? A cross-signed root certificate. What is that? So again, you can Google root certificate. It's a very special type of certificate. It is a certificate that is basically at the very top of any hierarchy. So it would be something that you take for granted. You would basically believe that that is a valid information on the public key of the actual certificate authority, right? That's what a root certificate is. I think we'll come to the cross-signed root certificates in a little while. So we just defer that for now. It talks about the pre-7.1.1 kit. So kit, what is kit here? Presumably it means any Android system, Android mobile, tablet or phone, and anything that's older than version 7.1.1. So you can Google again what the latest version is. So we're probably at 10 or 11 now. So that's pretty old. Okay, so and then it talks about Firefox, which is obviously a web browser. Okay. And before we even continue, let's remember the methodology behind all this. So first of all, when we read a story, typically the story is addressing someone. And what I would say is it's the security assessor. It's the kind of hat you have on when you look at the story. So who do you think would be targeted by this news item? You know, who should be concerned? Who should be alerted, in your opinion, if you think about it? And basically, if you look at the headline, I mean, it talks about the Android devices. You will probably think that it's the users of those devices. And in fact, if you scroll down a little bit, then somewhere, look here, it says one meaningful thing that affected Android users can do. So we're clearly having the users of the Android phone in mind here. So when you look at the story, you should basically imagine that you're a user of the Android device and what is now set in terms of the security issue here, the security challenge maybe, or maybe it's a problem. So the next step really is to remember, think about the asset. So what is the main critical asset? Typically, there's only one asset or maybe two critical assets that are really important for the functioning of your system, and this asset is under threat. So then the next step is to think about the threat. What sort of threat would it be? External, internal, and also the vulnerabilities. So is there a loophole somewhere? And remember, the threat and vulnerability, they need to match so that there's some form of risk and some harm, some damage resulting, and then at the end of the day, what are the possible controls? So that's our framework. So now the next step is to look at the asset. So can you think, and it's worth pausing the video and reading the story and trying to find the critical asset which is owned by the security assessor, right? We are looking at the asset from the perspective of the security assessors. So what would it be? So to make it a little bit easier, remember, there are actually asset categories. There's software, there's hardware, there's data, there's people, and then there's an overarching sort of logical asset, which is the system asset, okay? So then when you think about it, clearly the asset is somehow linked to the mobile device, isn't it? So would it be the entire device? Would it be part of the hardware? Well, probably not, because I think this is all about probably software or data, perhaps. It's not so much about the users themselves, because they're not really involved in any of the configuration issues here, because the problem here is that effectively the owner of the Android phone will at some point have problems by looking at websites that routinely use certificates, right? And these certificates might actually, and you can see this here somewhere, they will be expire. Look here. So next year, as of September the 1st, any root certificate that has been provided by this Let's Encrypt CA will actually expire, and they use other certificates. They use kind of better independent certificates, which are not cross-signed. So the cross-signing is basically a process to link the two certificates together initially to give them more credibility, to increase the trust, and eventually they get accepted over time. Everyone starts really trusting the new Let's Encrypt CA, and then you just kind of get rid of the other certificate and you set up your own independent root certificate. And that sort of transition process means that you need to update the certificates, and it turns out that apparently the Android phone is not automatically doing this for some of the older operating systems. So if you're still using the older operating system, then you're kind of stuck with this. So what's the asset then here? I would say the asset is actually a complex security service that your phone should provide, because your phone should allow you to securely browse the web. And that is not guaranteed anymore if your web browser doesn't actually accept the certificate. So it's kind of a combination of software and data. It's kind of a system asset actually. And I would say it's a service. So a very complex asset actually, but that is clearly what is under threat here. So it's very important that you understand this, that you find the critical asset, because then the rest is much easier. Okay. So having identified the critical asset, now we're looking at the threats and vulnerabilities. The order doesn't really matter. It's just important that we differentiate between those two things. They're completely different things. And here, by looking at the story, there is actually a description here, and this is going to be the threat. Okay. The threat is that effectively the change of certificate. So look here. Again, this paragraph that I've actually highlighted earlier, the root certificate, the cross-signed certificate will expire, and devices that haven't been updated in the past 4 years may find they're unable to connect securely to websites using the new certificate. So that paragraph, it's mainly about the threat, isn't it? The threat is the fact or the danger, the potential that the certificate will change, will become invalid, and that then the phone can't cope with that. But actually, the vulnerability at the same time is also implicitly already implied by this scenario, because of course if the device would automatically update certificates, then there wouldn't be a problem. So the vulnerability is actually the inability of the device to do that. So it's a weakness in the management aspect, the configuration. So we've actually, here in this story, we found that the threat and vulnerability are very closely related, and they literally come up in the same place of the story. Yeah. So now we've made good progress because we've identified the main asset, which is the security service of the phone, the Android phone. And then we are realizing that the threat is the expiration of the certificates, and the vulnerability is the inability of the phone to cope with that. So what's the potential risk? And that's explained as well, very much in the same area. So again, it's actually described here. They're unable to connect to websites securely. So that's a risk. The risk is simply that you cannot use secure browsing, and then obviously that could get in your way. So next question would be, what are the security goals that are actually compromised here in this scenario? Is it, remember, confidentiality, integrity, or availability? So once again, you could pause the video now and try to think about it. And now we will explain what it is. I would say it's the availability of the security service. That's what's going to get compromised. It will be removed. There's an interruption of that, isn't it? So it's availability. And now the last step is, after having identified the asset, threats, vulnerability, the compromise to the security goals, we would like to understand the control, the mitigation. So how could this problem be fixed? And of course, the obvious solution would be to say you upgrade to the latest Android operating system, but that might not be feasible for everyone because obviously it would cost money. So the story basically says that it's not clear. There is no real fix available that is very simple, and maybe it should be the operating system providers, Google in this case, they should somehow upgrade the software and make it automatic so that people don't have to worry. In the story, they mentioned two other controls here. The first possibility would be to simply use a specific type of browser. So if you use Firefox, then Firefox normally is up to date, because what it does, it stores the required public keys of the main certificate authorities. So that would include the Let's Encrypt CA in the actual browser software. So by using Firefox, you would not have a problem, but you would have a problem if you use maybe some of the other browsers or the default Chrome browser. And a second possibility here is to enable something quite complicated. Look here. So if Let's Encrypt will actually enable the automatic certificate management environment, ACME, then it would be easier for other clients to actually automatically retrieve some kind of bridge, some kind of certificate chain, which would then fix the situation. Okay, so and then there's one last point. They also address a different type of security assessor. So these here are not the users, these are hosting providers. If you're actually hosting a website and on your the certificate you're using for your website is actually issued by Let's Encrypt, then you would also be affected by this, and you would have to make sure that you, of course, make sure you've got the up-to-date certificate installed. So I think you've seen that reading a story like that can be surprisingly complex in terms of the terminology that is mentioned, and it's really helpful if you are aware of the basic security terminology, and then you can try to map the different things to the information in the story. And I hope that has helped you. And what you should do is you should go away and try it on a different story. So the register is quite good for this. They've got quite an interesting style, how they write it. And you should look up anything that's not familiar to you on the web first so that you understand the facts. And then you need to try to map the framework, the methodology to the story. So very soon I will do another video where I will explain another case study. Thanks for watching.